Okay. Slides. That should be good. Okay. Oh, ignore that. Quick updates on everything. A lot of people are stressed. I know this. This week's terrible, and this always tends to happen before a break, where everything just hits the fan, and then interviews are on top of it. So a lot of people have reached out. There was a lot of love in the chat when I sent this. So that's good. And if you didn't, then DM me and explain what's going on, or talk to me now. And if you haven't DM me, the due dates stand on the declarative functions in Flexbox, so you'll lose the amount of bits that you get if you're late on it. Is how I'm going to do it, because from here on out I am like registering bits of like if you get the activities done and if you are present, or you've already told me reasons why you won't be present. I'll work it out, and then I'll figure out how much bits everyone has. I still haven't gone through it. Right now I'm just recording who's doing the activities and who hasn't, who's attending the lectures, and then we'll figure it out so that it's reasonable. So let me know if there are issues, bottom line. And you should have part one of the project done for today. Raise your hand if you got it done. Ooh, really? Okay, that's awesome. Okay.
I think the people that aren't here are more likely to not.
Oh, I know this. Oh, I'm well aware of this. I wasn't even sure if more than 5 people got it done, period. So that's good. Because you weren't supposed to DM me or anything. You weren't supposed to DM me. Yeah, what?
Your standards are so low.
They're so after declarative functions, standards are low. And also, did everyone see in the chat, I actually posted solutions to the last 2. I explained it. I walked through how to write a reduce function in a way that's like, because I explained this to a lot of people in a lot of different ways and realized the best way to explain it is to just start with the for each loop and work your way back until you can write it as a reduce. So that video goes over how to rewrite it like that, so you can think about it easily, and then it explains how those last 2 problems work. So that should be even easier to get it done. Get it done. I think you guys probably don't have it done, but I need to tell everyone else. But yeah, I was asking if everyone had it done because I was thinking that we would do this as like a kind of pair programming thing, where you pair with someone that you may or may not know. Probably someone who's seated very far away from you, because then it's less likely that you know them. Or you're friends on really bad terms, I don't know. I don't know. So if you didn't get it done, pair with someone who has, and then and if you both got it done, then rock, paper, scissors for which one you use. And then we'll do the step 2 together, and you'll work with each other in order to figure out how to actually get it done. Because some people get stuck and some people don't. So it's helpful to have 2 people looking at the same code and troubleshoot together. So I want to start doing that. We're going to do it today. Other stuff, schedule your booty calls. I'm very proud of this name. I'm very proud. This will be the quick one-on-one thing that I mentioned last week. If you have the project done by end of today, you're in great shape. So try to schedule a call with me tomorrow so we can figure out how the bootcamp's been going, how you like it, general feedback stuff, and then whether you want to do the front end or the back end focus, because on Thursday, for the second half, we're going to do our first split off, where you're going to learn a little bit about how to set up a front end environment, a little bit about how to set up a back end one. And if you're not able to schedule a meeting for tomorrow, that's fine. We can do it Thursday or Friday. We can also do it after break. I know a lot of people are going to end up doing it after break because they don't have the project done. So you can just pick a front end or back end, just day of, just pick one, see how it goes, and we can decide if you want to switch to another one. It's no big deal, but it's nice if you know which one you want to be in, so then you can just stick with it and you don't have to catch up after the setup day. Because setup day is always the hardest part, because no one knows how to set anything up, just from experience. Okay, that's all I wanted to go through here. So now comes the teaching part. That thing I'm prepared for. Here we go. So I just put this up on the Notion. It's a walkthrough of how to call an API, which is taking a lot of the stuff that was in these previous 2 ones that Andre wrote very thoroughly. And you can read up on that in order to understand how async actually works under the hood and how to actually write out asynchronous calls. I'll do it and I'll walk through it slowly still, assuming that you guys either don't remember it, haven't read it. I didn't explain it super well last time. I kind of just ran through how set timeout works and moved on. So today I'll be more thorough about that. But the main thing we're going to do is how you call an API, because we want our joke generator to be getting from the joke generator API. It's to generate a random joke when you click a button. It's the end goal. And then we'll do some slightly more fancy stuff. But yeah, this is a basic walkthrough that you can read on your own. I'll highlight a couple things here. First, I wanted to explain like what's an API, what's the difference between an API and the apps that you've been writing so far, the little web apps that you've written on CodePen. It generally comes down to what a server and a client is. So basically, a client-side application or a client website is what you've been writing so far with the HTML, CSS, and JavaScript to display information, display data to the user. It's basically all the stuff that's like on their computer locally and being rendered to show them. And then a server is something that would exist most often remotely. So it's just some external data farm, like it's on a Twitter server, it's on a Google server, Amazon server, whatever. And then it exposes information for those clients to retrieve and then display locally. So server's a thing you call to get information, and the client's the one that displays it, is the most simple way to explain it. And you can technically run servers locally as well, which when we get into backend development, is what you have to do in order to see how it works and get it running. But that's the basic distinction to make, where APIs are pulling server-side applications in order to get some information back. An API stands for Application Programming Interface, which is the most vague acronym I've ever heard. It doesn't really explain what we're using it for here. So in our case, the API is basically just the entry point in order to get data out of some server. And it's going to be pulled through endpoints. And endpoints are kind of like the functions you've already been writing, where you send it some parameters. Like if I were to get like the user some information about my Twitter profile, I would tell Twitter, hey, I want, well, you can think of it as a function, where it's like the parameters I send in are my user ID, and then the return of that Twitter endpoint is going to be the actual user information for that ID. So basically, API take in parameters and spit out information as JavaScript objects is what we're going to be dealing with. And that's something called JSON, which is literally just JavaScript objects. It's just a file type where you can write JavaScript objects. That's all I really need to know about that. And then there's the request types. Can you see this? I just realized, can you see this? Kind of.
It's the second one.
Second one?
Yeah. Not those left.
Oh, this.
No, but then the right. yeah.
This is
have
at least
that was
into
it.
it.
That was it.
So like option 2?
Yeah, that's perfect.
Okay.
Ooh, yeah.
In fact, these are a bunch of white buttons with no labels. Nothing is told you.
Push all of them.
This should be UI design class, because we can talk about this for the next hour. Okay. So can you see it? It looks like it's pretty clear. Okay, cool. So yeah, I'm going to go over the request types real quick, which is basically just the language used to talk to an API and tell it, I want to get information from you, or I want to give information to you. So the first one is get. It's pretty self-explanatory what you're doing. You send in some parameters, or no parameters depending, and then you get back some info. Post is when you want to actually send information, like on Reddit, when you post a comment, you actually have to send a post request to the server so we can put that comment on the server, and then that comment can be read back to other clients so that it gets sent around. And then put is kind of like post, except you never use it. So, well, you do, but for the stuff that we're doing and the projects that we're doing, you probably won't touch put. Just basically know that it's for like sending entire files to a particular URL instead of just these little like objects of data. And then there's a more in-depth explanation there, which is a link to a Stack Overflow post that I always have to reference whenever I don't know what put does, because I never use it, so I always forget. And this is a very basic example of calling an API with fetch, and I'm just going to code this live so that you can actually see what it's spitting out. It's basically just, this is the Pokedex API, which is awesome. You can get every piece of information about Pokemon that you want. In this case, it's getting the info about Ditto, and then it spits back a bunch of info, and doesn't send a GIF, but I wish it did. So I'm going to go back over here. I'm actually going to do it on StackBlitz, I think. It'll make it a little nicer. And by the way, does everyone have a StackBlitz account? Or do you know how to do that? Or have you just not been using it?
Should we switch?
It's like, well, yes, but actually no. I mean, you can if you want. You can just you can follow along with me and code that if you want. I just prefer the console on StackBlitz, that's the only reason. And we're definitely going to be using it next week instead of CodePen. So we'll fully switch next week for sure. So if you want to make an account now, you can, is the best way to phrase that.
Are we gonna download something locally eventually?
Yeah, definitely. I'm just gonna use Stacklets to like explain some of the concepts abstractly, just like in a little sandbox,
Gotcha.
and then we'll actually start like downloading stuff and building full apps once we like know the tools that we're using. That's the thought. I don't know. I'm gonna use Stacklets still. You need a GitHub in order to use it, but you can follow along just using the JavaScript tab on CodePen, and then opening the console, either using inspect element to see the console or using the CodePen console. They should both work fine for this demo. So I'm going to remove this.
Could you make the text just a little bigger?
Yes, for sure.
Do you know if there's any way to move the preview windows to the bottom?
It's a good question, right? Well, the thing is, you can like,
Yeah.
you can kind of just.
Okay.
That's my best answer. If you want on the bottom, kind of just this.
Okay.
There's probably this? No.
Yeah,
this is VS
I
Code.
like
This is
pretty much
VS Code.
everything obvious, and
This makes sense. You can open a new window
Yeah.
if you want.
Okay, that's good.
Wait, how do I get it back? Oh no. Oh, okay. You can have it in both. Interesting. Okay. That'll be more useful when we're actually like using a UI. For this, we just want the console, so I'm going to keep it on the side. Let's make it a little easier. So I'm going to go back over to the Notion. I'm going to copy this call here. This is going to the Pokedex Api. And we're going to use something called fetch in order to actually call an API and get some info back. So everything is there. Imagine it isn't. So this is a fetch call. And notice that every time we want to call an API endpoint, we have to give it a URL, because every API endpoint you're going to interact with is exposed just as a website, basically, where you can go to this website and then get back the information. In this case, we're calling the Poke API version 2, and then we're getting the Ditto Pokemon off of it. Every API is their own way of formatting how these URLs work. In this case, it knows I want to query for like info about a Pokemon, and then I can put in the actual name of it. That's just how this one works. And you can look up the API documentation and scroll through in order to see how it actually works. So what we're going to do off of this is we're going to use a asynchronous callback, which is basically, we want to specify some code we want to run when this fetch comes back. Because we're calling an API, and that API may take a fraction of a millisecond, or it may take 2 seconds in order to actually get back to us with the info we want, because it's on a server. We have no control over it. It's just something else. So we don't know how long it's going to take, so we have to use an asynchronous call in order to wait for it and then do something once it comes back. So this is its own asynchronous function, which means that in order to get the info, in order to make a callback off of it, you just use .then, which basically says call this guy, and then when it comes back, do a thing. And you put a callback inside of it, arrow functions or the word function, you know, either way. I use arrow functions. You can do whatever. And then the parameter that's sent into that callback is the response from the call. So in this case, this is the response that our API gives us. And then here comes the weird part about fetch, where you'd think you can just console log the response, right? Because it came back. Well, you can, and it'll give you this response, and you will not understand what this response is. Where's my information about Ditto? And that's because it actually sends back a response with a lot of extra callbacks in order to get the body and everything else. So in this case, as I said, the response from this API is going to be a JSON object, and that's usually what you want to get back. It's just a JavaScript object. And the way fetch works is to get that JSON off of the response. It's actually its own asynchronous function. So in order to actually get the result of the JSON, we have to do another .then after we get the JSON off of it. So the way to do that is to return that asynchronous function. In this case, JSON is the asynchronous function that actually gets the JSON off of the response. And then, because we returned it from this first function, we can chain another .then to the bottom of that. And then the body of this API will be the JSON that came back from what was returned here. And then inside of this, we can actually console log the JSON that comes back. And this will be the actual information about the Pokemon, where it gives you the abilities, base experience, a ton of random information about them. So that's how fetch works, basic format. You run the fetch call, you tell it what URL you want. In this case, we don't have any parameters, so it's just this. And then you do a first dot then in order to get a response from the server, and then a second dot then in order to actually get the object off of that response, which is its own asynchronous function, as I said. I know he needs help with something. I ghosted him last night. I feel bad because I don't have time to help him until after this. Okay. And the last thing that we might want to do is to catch if something goes wrong, because the server could explode and we don't know it. Maybe the server's not running, maybe it's down, so it's just not going to send us a response. It's going to time out or something. Or we send it a URL that it doesn't recognize and it's like, I don't know what to do with this. So in case of any of those errors where something goes wrong, you want to do a .catch at the end of this, which will basically catch if something goes wrong in either of these .thens. Basically, if something explodes anywhere down the chain, it'll call this error function instead, and then we can log that error using console.error, which will actually format it to be read in our console so that we see it. It's like, oh, that was an error. So in order to force an error, I guess I can just like, well, I don't think that's going to do anything. If I do it something like this, okay, yeah. So this was an error that came out because it was trying to get the JSON response, and it was like, there was no JSON because this isn't a valid call. So it failed here, or it failed like going to this dot then, so then the cache ran. Is basically what happened. So that's how you handle your errors. We're not going to talk too much about that because you may want to do a whole ton of like fallbacks and weirdness if it was an actual web app. And it's like, I needed this data for my app to work, so now I have to do this plan B, is basically what your .catch is. So we're not going to worry too much about that. Just assume it works. And hopefully nothing breaks during this demo today. And then you can also write this using different syntax. Instead of .thens, you can use the async await syntax, which is also detailed on the Notion, explaining how it works. But it's basically the first way to get the result from an asynchronous call without using a callback. So you can actually just assign the result of it to a variable directly, and I'll explain that syntax really briefly. So if we want to get the response from this API, we could say something like, instead of the .then, you can actually do console response equals await. The word await basically says, I need to wait for this asynchronous function to come back, and then we can await the fetch. And instead of running a .then and a callback, it's actually just going to assign the result of this to response when it comes back. That's basically how it works. The one problem with this is that you actually have to force it to recognize that it's an asynchronous call, because you can't just use await willy-nilly everywhere, because it doesn't know how to resolve everything correctly. So the way to fix that is you have to run this inside of another function if you wanted to use this syntax. So it would be like async function get info, or get ditto info. That's what this call is doing. You could put inside of an asynchronous function so that it knows what's going on. That equal sign is not supposed to be there. And then it'll await that response. And instead of having to use a callback, this is just this. Like, it's this that's being returned inside that callback. So we basically rewritten all of this as just this guy. And then because of that, we have to do the same chaining thing, where it was like, in order to get the JSON, we do the same thing. We await response.json, which is another way to .then on the end of it. We just await. And this is interesting, because this is the only way to actually like force your code to not run until the other thing comes back. So basically, it will not move on to JSON equals await response until the first line is done. So it'll pause on that line until something comes back, and then it'll run the next line, pause, and then return the end of it. And then we can just console log. Sorry. We can console log the JSON, and we're not using this anymore. We're just using this guy. And I should be able to call this function. I may have set something up wrong, so I hope I didn't. Okay. I think that worked. I think that worked. Yeah. Or did it?
Wait, I'm confused.
Wait, sorry, I didn't mean to console log that.
Okay.
Yeah, that's what I meant to do. And this doesn't look like the same thing we got back before. Or does it? Oh, because I'm not calling the right thing. We were calling this before. Okay, there we go. There's the response. In much the same way. The only difference is you have to put it inside of an async function, because without the word async, it doesn't know if you need to pause on each line or not. So async is basically saying, hey, in some parts of this, you may need to block and wait until this one comes back before you move on. And if you just put this like outside of a function body, it's not going to run. It's going to throw an error. And the error is going to make no sense because I accidentally did it myself, and the error made no sense. So avoid that. Know that that's a thing. So if you use async, you got to do this and call the function. Another super fancy thing you can do is instead of calling the function, well, actually, I'm not going to teach you this. This is weird. Well, I could. This is an interesting little thing you can do to declare a function and run it immediately. You can wrap that function in parentheses and then call it. And that works.
Yeah.
You can do that if you want.
To actually use.
And you don't even have to call it something anymore. It just runs. It's called an IIFE, an IIFE. You can Google that if you want. It's very fancy. And this is a rare case where it's actually really useful to declare a function and immediately run it right after you declare it. That's what we're trying to do here, is we're trying to add an async to it.
Is that
So,
like an anonymous function?
Huh?
Java? Like an anonymous function?
This one is. That's what you mean. It's a function without a name. So we can't call this function because it doesn't have a name that's assigned to it. So never do that unless it's in an IIFE, and then you can. Because you don't need to call it, it's being called immediately. So yeah, that was a walkthrough of how fetch works. I hope it made sense because now we're going to use it on our joke generator right now. And for this, I'm going to hide the CSS so you don't cheat. Well, I think most of you had it done, so it doesn't even matter. So this is something we're going to add later on. We're going to add categories in order to, I had to do something to make it a little more complex. That was never there. So this is what we started with, right? I assume this is what most people have. A button, some text, a GIF, whatever. I don't have a plan to like randomly generate a GIF every time because then we would need another API that generates GIFs for us. If you want to go research that, I'm sure Jiffy lets you do it or something. Like just call Jiffy and get a random image. That's a side project if you want to try it. But all we're going to focus on is just getting a joke and putting it in. So yeah, I put on the Notion, I'll show you. It's inside the curriculum under Joke Generator project. In the activity info, I put a link to the actual API documentation. Sorry. If you click on that, it'll pull it up. I just had another tab open or whatever. And this is the API documentation that you can read through. And what we're going to focus on is the first endpoint here. Just generate a random dab joke by calling this and spitting out the joke at the end. And the joke is going to be inside of a joke param. This is what the response should look like, an object with the ID of the joke, the text, and the status, which is whether or not it came back correctly. So yeah, we didn't do that. So do you want me to write the how to make a button listener? Do you guys feel comfortable making a button listener? Like listening for click events. Okay, I'm gonna trust you. And I'm gonna do it. Okay, because this is the one thing I haven't detailed in the Notion yet, and I feel bad. All we have to do is add an event listener. Like so, we're gonna listen for clicks. And then our callback is what gets fired whenever a click happens. And then we're gonna see, oh, sorry, the parameter of the function is what thing did the click. So basically, if the thing that did the click has an ID of random, because over here I made my button have an ID of random so I could get it easily. So event.target, to remind you, is the element that caused the click event. So this is gonna actually return this button as a DOM object. When we're talking about like DOM manipulation and getting an element inside of JavaScript, that's what that is. And then we can get the ID attribute off of it because it has an ID declared. So if that ID is random, triple equals. If it's equal to random, then first I'm just going to console log hooray to make sure nothing is messed up here. And I'm just going to call console, make sure of that. And if I click on make me laugh, we should see hooray printed a bunch of times. And yes, my button does fancy things.
Oh my god.
Yeah, it's actually very simple. And if I click anywhere else, it's not going to fire that, but if I click here, it's going to. Yeah. So that's how you write a button listener, and that's how we listen for that specific button. And yes, you can also add an event listener to the button element directly, but for reasons I explained previously, and because of an article that I will put in the Notion finally, you should put your event listeners on the document and then check what thing caused the event. That's the best way to do button listeners.
Why is that the best way? Because it seems just like it would be easier.
It feels
to
like it's a
listen
little
for-
counterintuitive.
Yeah.
It there's efficiency reasons is the best way to put it.
Okay.
A word has to bubble up from that event listener and then go down. Or basically if you had like 100 buttons on the page, instead of creating 100 event listeners, you're just creating one and then checking what caused it. And you would think checking what caused it would take a while, but it actually doesn't. It's actually going to be faster. But we're not going to deal with this very long because when we get to front-end frameworks, this gets like rewritten in a way that's way easier to use. I'll leave it at that. But yeah, this is how you do a button listener. And basically inside of this, we want to do a fetch call to the joke generator. And we want to use either .then or async await, where you'd have to write like an async function around all of this. You know, you have to make an iffy around everything in order to use async await. Or you can just use .thens, which I think might be a little cleaner here because we don't have to worry that it's a callback. It still looks fine. So what I want you guys to yeah.
So if you do like on the console log something, the if statement is supposed to log out thing.
When you click the button.
Yeah.
Yep. Do you have an ID of random on the button?
Yeah, I just added that. Okay.
Because it should work. If you have an ID on the button, then this should be equal to that. If you got stuck, we can figure it out.
Right.
But yeah, now I'm going to leave you guys to your own devices to use the fetch API and see if you can get this working. Everyone buddy up. I'm going to see if this is a good idea. Everyone is disapproving of everyone else. Okay. Do I have to forcefully pair you people?
Sorry.
Maybe so? Okay.
It'll be fun.
It'll be fun! Yeah.
Wait, how do you start the new ESM project?
Do what?
You know Stacklets, like there are different templates.
Oh, you're using Stacklets?
Yeah.
Use the JavaScript one. At the bottom. Oh, fine.
Oh wait, I didn't even realize you weren't using Stacklets.
I'm not. The main reason is because this is like a landscape layout and Stacklets. It's that little portrait thing, so that's why. So request everyone on this side of the room pair with someone over here.
What found in the middle?
Sorting out version. Pair, like that.
Outside. Yo, what's your name?
Basically down this middle. And who has more? 7. Okay. Here. Wait. Do we have an odd number of people? And someone will catch you up. We're pairing up with someone to work on that step 2. So yeah.
There are 15.
There are 15?
I think if I'm not
Oh right. No, but we didn't do anything.
Okay.
We 3 people.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah, I was about to say no loners, a group of 3. So pick your favorite step 1 implementation and use it, I guess. Or do rock, paper, scissors to decide who's
It has
superior.
Yeah, me too.
I think everyone's paired up.
Ben,
Yep.
we're having the same problem here. Is any console log?
And then I couldn't figure out how to like
Also, it's hard
do
to
jobs.
figure out how to make the it not show up. I feel like put my
Oh, that's something to do with it's like
How do you?
Delete it. Yeah, whenever you get that, it's like, you shouldn't cause it though. I'll have to log outside of the same time. I'll have to log it back up.
Yeah, because I was like, I'm typing it on.
Oh, if you're
And then I can just give it a I call it class hello, where it says windows, and then deal with all the
Yeah.
stress.
So
Maybe you can
I
use that.
just
Like,
so can I just say not dev and then manipulate together or I just say that?
Go back to your
Usually dot div is like dot whatever your class is.
Okay, so I can't do not dev. Okay.
You can, you but it's hard to write it.
You should
And write down.
Okay, so I can do that.
Oh, yeah. You gotta put the ID on fire, but you can just name that.
I just
Go back to your
pasted the fetch.
Please be my TA next semester.
Me too.
Like,
Oh,
same
I know I will struggle.
We're in the same CS class. I see you. I always sleep in that class though. Like, you know, like last Friday, I just did this, and it was the last 30 minutes. Like I finished the homework already, so I was like looking at her, and then like her voice became background music, and then
Yeah.
I'm like went to sleep.
She'll like spend like 10 minutes.
Oh, document job edit.
Oh, oh my gosh.
Very good.
I don't know why. Wait,
One thing I'm going to say is your fetch isn't going to work because of a reason.
I don't think you're.
I think we're working on it.
Because I discovered this before the workshop, and it's terrible. But basically, the joke generator API doesn't return JSON by default, so you have to tell it to return a JSON. And the way you do that is you add an option to the inside of this that I had pasted somewhere. I hope I have it somewhere. Maybe yes, maybe no.
I just put a random mouse picture, and I was like,
I'll get it for you. I'll get it for you.
Yeah, I didn't copy this.
I did the
the color is beautiful. That I was seeing that like in my brain as I was reading
You do a whole thing.
Oh, it is a whole thing.
I'm more confused than
Wait, why?
Something as an option.
So here, we're passing in this actually, which is probably similar.
You don't have to. I personally.
So it's on that section.
So when we're sending the target request, we're specifying the type of response that we want back, basically. So
Sorry.
except actually,
I'm making sure I have this right because I don't want to write out the whole answer yet.
So, to have more confidence on how APIs work, then like Pokemon was like
These are for backups when I don't feel like waking up and getting to college in the morning. Like, I never go to village in the morning. I just run to my 8 a.m. and then.
No, it's like big move I did it.
using those header parameters.
I did it back either at 3 p.m. or like 9
It'd be a lot
p.m.
easier if you could just.
And then I'm like, do I want to do the languages or something?
That's much simpler than having the headers.
Like,
But whoever came up with this was like, oh, let's
the food is actually
I think these are the options in order to get it. I hope this
So then
works.
why?
I'm gonna test it myself.
No, yeah.
So does that
I just
mean
wanted to
then-
know, like.
Does that likely mean that you just say you just say
I like live at that Starbucks. Like I know Alicia, Momo Licious. Like I know all their names.
because I know like most places it has a route where you
There's
just
still
have
really
to-
low.
It's just having
Learning the
one
code is the worst. I just see those people waiting in line. Why are you doing this to yourself?
I would say it's
literally just
Procrastination.
Yeah, but it's still,
Yeah, but it's still
all
like
you're really
virtual.
doing is have some extra configuration.
It's like,
Yeah.
Yep, that's correct.
I really feel it.
It is annoying.
That's what you need to add to your fetch. So this is the one thing I didn't explain about fetch, where the first parameter is the URL, as you know, and then the second one is all of the options you want to put on your request. So in the last example, we didn't have to put any options because it was just going to send us JSON and we were fine. It was going to send us some JavaScript. By default, the icon has joke API doesn't do that. So you have to tell it, I want to get a JSON object. And the way to do that is to add this object, this headers object to your request in order for it to know I want JSON. And that is the second parameter inside of the fetch. The second parameter is all your options. In this case, the options is an object where I tell it I want to get, and I want the headers to be accept only JSON. So that's what those options do. You don't have to deal with this too often, because most APIs are smart enough to know JSON is the best way to do it.
Oh boy, it got worse.
I heard I'm learning how it works.
he isn't.
Well,
Okay.
What was your question?
I was Wait, did I give me this?
I don't think there was a level because I don't think it's any context.
Can we go to, let's
we
go to
still
your
need to convert it
recipe.
to JSON.
That's true.
The second thing? Yeah.
We still need to do
So it's not converting, it's actually reading the response.
okay.
So it actually like takes a response and parses it to something you can use.
Oh yeah, so it's not, yeah, so the JavaScript can't recognize inherently that it's JSON, if it tells the JavaScript, you have to basically say this is JSON.
Yeah. You have to like run a function that converts it to something you
Okay,
can use.
gotcha.
You can just add another dot net.
I felt that
Yeah.
so hard. I'm a little confused. Actually, I take it back. I'm very confused.
Yeah, so I would just here. You can say that you want me to explore. Add options or what now?
Yeah, that's what you should be able to kind of.
So you should be able to open it.
Wait, actually, that could you explain
Yeah, for sure.
like what this is doing again? So it's saying like you want to get the joke from like the.
It's basically just saying, first of all, this is the, well, I don't even think method get is necessary because it's like the default. But it's basically saying, this is a GET request. I'm not posting anything to you. I'm getting stuff from you. So that's all it's specifying. And then the important thing is in the headers to say I want the response to be a JSON object. Because there are actually other formats of data that it can send back. One of them is called XML. You can send back a bunch of different file types. Oh, you want to tell it I want JavaScript from this API.
You want to
So I can
put the dad joke generator and the picture next to each other. I'm gonna let Ben answer that because I suck at CSS, and I have a hacky way to do it, but I just think Ben is better.
Oh, so would it matter if I had like
So I think you need it so that it'll be capitalized, so it won't mess that up. I could be wrong though.
We got a CSS. Let's swap.
Now?
What was your question? I'm swapping.
How do you put these two together? I kind of forgot.
Put them next to each other?
Yeah.
Don't worry about this right now. Because we gotta get this thing done. I can explain it to you in a minute. It's Flexbox. You put a Flexbox container around both of these, and then you say display flex, and they should go next to each other by default.
Do I have to add
You have to, yeah. You could also, add a container.
there's no container.
You just need to.
Because I cheated. So by default, CodePen adds a container around everything called body. So in my code, I actually targeted the body and made it flex.
Got it.
The other option is to create a container of your own and target that one.
So put another div or selection.
You can put a div.
Okay.
I tried doing that, like using the body, but are you supposed to say body and then dot?
Yeah, because dot body would be a class name, and body is like the actual name of the element, so you have to use it. Yeah. Also Everything was good. I thought that was a button for a second. Okay. It's so good. Okay. What's that? Well, on the Notion, you can look at how fetch works.
Okay.
You can, like all the syntax is there on how to do it. Because I don't expect you to remember it, like from memory.
A lot of weeks going
An
back.
example of a fetch call is on the Notion if you forgot how it works or how it
Yeah,
works.
looking forward to that.
Oh.
I did absolutely nothing today. I woke up at 9 p.m. and I was going to my only class I had today. My class got canceled. So I went to the office hours for that class. Came back, tried to study Chinese, went and read Webtoon for 3 hours. And then now we're here. So I still have 2 midterms and an SAG this week though. So.
Oh, I know we did that. I get blamed.
Is that how it's
Sad.
That's not my professor.
I'd be so sad if you fell.
That is your say.
I'd cry.
Yeah.
Bye.
I like.
I have lazy. I don't know. I think he's a good person. He's a good person. I always sit in the back because I always try to speak my brain when you're or I try to listen to him, but I get so confused when I listen to him. Like I just watched Mayor's video.
If he's done,
Did anyone get something to come back from the API yet?
Yeah.
Okay. Some.
He's interested. I talked to him. He's interested.
Yeah.
Right. Everyone, if you get it working, I can explain how to like make the paragraph say the thing. So to make the paragraph say the thing, you just set the inner text of the paragraph. So you actually have to get a reference to the paragraph inside of JavaScript to tell it, I want to change the text inside of this paragraph. And the way I can do that is I'll just add an ID to my paragraph called joke. And then inside of my JavaScript, I can say document.getElement by ID, as we know. And this is our paragraph. So this is like joke text. Good job. So that's like the actual paragraph element. And then you can use this fancy property on that element called inner text, which sets the text inside of the thing. And you can say inner text equals whatever. I'll just do this in order to show it working. And then when I click the button, it should change the text to blah. Yeah, like that. So that's how you do it. You get a reference to the element, and then you set the inner text of that reference. So the only thing missing is getting the fetch call to work. Which I'll give you guys like 2 more minutes for, because I wanted to move forward to like one other step.
Can you also do get element by class? Is that also thing?
You could do that.
Okay.
It's just going to return an array instead of one element. So you can just get the element at 0, like the first index, and that'll be it. If nothing else matches it.
That was your frustrated?
Is it just convention that we create, or that we assign a variable to the actual HTML element instead of just saying document.getElement by ID and then just saying inner text?
You could do that. I was doing that for clarity's sake.
Okay.
Convention is whatever you want, kind of.
What would you do?
The only reason you wouldn't want to do that is if there's some risk that it's going to be undefined when you get back, or like doesn't find a match inside of your document. So in those cases, you might want like an if statement to make sure it exists, and then set the inner text so you don't have an error or something.
Okay, yeah, that makes sense.
You can't if you want to like keep on steps. This will go because this is where your packages API call. So this needs to be closed. It's weird. It's weird. It's this little guy. Yeah.
How about now? I think that's enough for me to show the solution because I just wanted to move on to another step. But yeah, how many people did it with a sake of wait instead of .then? I don't think any.
You said something about never making an async, and you made it sound scary.
I did. Because it kind of is when it's like it's not inside of a function, so now I have to like do this thing. It's weird. But we're about to do it. I'm gonna force you. Let's write out this fetch call. So the URL, if you go to the documentation, was just this. We want to get request for this guy. So I'm going to copy that and put it in as our URL. The options are what I told you. I want to get request. I want to make sure I get JSON back so nothing errors out, nothing's weird. And then we do our .then chain, as you know. The response from the server, we want to get the JSON off of that response. This is going to actually like take that response, interpret it as a JSON file on your computer, and then spit out a JavaScript object to you. So this is like an asynchronous call being run on your computer in order to convert the response into something you can use. And then, once that conversion is done, we can take that, JSON, and then the joke should equal JSON, I believe it's JSON.text? If I go over here, it says it's joke. Okay, so I want the joke key off of the response. That's going to be the actual text. And then I'm going to console log the joke to make sure. So when I click on this, it should fire the fetch call and give me the thing. Watch it not do that. There it is. So every time I click it, I should get a new joke because it just generates a random one off of that API call, and it calls the API every time. So the last thing we want to do is actually set the inner text to it. So I'm just going to copy this stuff that I already showed you, where I get the paragraph, and I set its inner text to not blah, I want to set it to the joke. So now, every time I click this button, we should get a new joke over here. Like so. How about that? Okay. So that's a very basic implementation. We may not have time to get through all of this, but it's an extended challenge. If you got this far, you're good to go. Just send me a link, and I'll give you a thumbs up. Unless your CSS isn't done. So what we're going to do now, very quickly, and don't worry if the styles get messed up for this, because I didn't tell you about this in advance, but we're going to add some more buttons below this button, and I'm putting it inside of a div so that they all go next to each other, because we're about to do a category search, basically, because you can actually search the dad joke API for categories of jokes. So we're going to look for history. These are the terms I found. Hipster jokes, history jokes, and bees, because bees. And now we have our buttons down here. I just styled all the buttons to be that. And also we can't have the same ID for every button, by the way. Can't do that. So there's that. We have a bunch of buttons. And I'm gonna add some text above this for clarity's sake. Or choose a category of funny. And I put inside a paragraph tag, which you technically don't need. Okay, there. So now we have our separate buttons. And by the way, these should not change anything over here because we're not listening for these buttons. We're just listening for the one with an ID at random. So now, what I'm going to have you guys do is use we have almost no time. We're going to use this endpoint down here, search for dad jokes. We can actually search for things. And I'm using this so that you guys know how to actually like add parameters, which I mentioned before. You can send parameters to a server to tell it this is the kind of stuff I want to get. And I'm just going to write out that for you. The fetch request looks something like this. It's the call to the search endpoint. And then in order to add a parameter, use a question mark to start your list of parameters. And then if I go back to the API, it says, these are the parameters it accepts. So it accepts a page, a limit, which we don't care about those, and the term, which is the actual thing you're searching for. So term is our parameter. And that's set equal to whatever value. In this case, I'm going to set it equal to bees in order to search for all the dad jokes involving bees. And then I can just copy this code, kind of. I'm just going to console log the result in order to show you guys what it's actually doing. And this is just outside of all my functions, by the way, so it should just run every time. I'm going to open my console here. That's not about bees. Hang on. Oh, I forgot the options. Yeah, so it's coming back as something that it doesn't understand, so it just errors out silently. Sad. Okay. This should work. It doesn't. What does it come back as? Okay. Here we go. Oh, it sends an array of things that match. Right. So it's inside of results. Should be, I think. Yeah, it sends back an array of things. I forgot about that. Instead of just one thing. So you can just get the first one for the sake of this. So just get the first result because we're not iterating over an array right now. We have 2 minutes. But at least you understand how params work. So all I wanted you guys to do was basically just do this fetch request again and map it to each of these individual buttons and then set the text to a hipster joke, a history joke, or a bees joke whenever you click on it. And you can just set it to the first result that comes back. And if you want to be slick, you can do it as a reusable function, which would be like, if I did async, it could be an async function called getDadJoke that all of our event listeners could use. I really wish I had time to explain this further. Do you mind if I go over it by like 5 minutes? Maybe. Yeah. Okay. Okie dokie. So I'm going to make this a reusable function where basically inside of your event listener, you're either just going to tell it nothing or you're going to call it with the search term, basically. And in JavaScript, basically, a parameter can be optional. So like for random, I don't want a search term, so I just call getDadJoke, and I don't pass it a search term. And then inside of here, I can basically check if search term is undefined, aka I didn't send it a search term, then I want the URL to just be this. Otherwise, I want the URL to be something else. I'm throwing a lot at you, I'm sorry. But yeah, I'm just gonna do this. So the URL is gonna be the fetch URL. And if search term is undefined, then we want to call just the random thing. So fetch URL is that. Otherwise, if it does pass a search term, then we want our fetch URL to do the search thingy, which will just be.
That's actually perfect.
I have to wait for it to go. Oh, I don't. Okay, it's coming back down. Not done. So that's one way you can do it, where you check for a search term, and if there isn't one, then we just want to call the random thing. Otherwise, we want to call the search endpoint. So we basically check if it was sent something. And then inside of our if statements, for which thing was called, like for random, we don't pass it a param, so it's not going to do anything. And then otherwise, we could have IDs for each of these, So if it was a hipster button, you can call get dad joke and pass it the hipster term, and then it would do the same thing, but now it's going to grab this stuff. And we need to change this to fetch URL, right? And that's what it's going to call, and the process is going to be the same, basically. Except this would have to be results instead of joke. Yeah. This was supposed to be an activity for you guys, but I realized I ran out of time, so I tried to code it as quickly as possible. And you don't need the async unless you rewrite this using async await, basically. So yeah, this was the basic skeleton of what I wanted you guys to implement. Try to get this working on your own because there's a couple things I've forgotten here. But basically, this is one way that you can, first of all, this is how params work. You use the question mark and you pass it things. Then you can make stuff reusable inside of a function, which is a fairly common pattern that you're going to be using on your front ends and stuff. I'll finish this up and put it on the slides so you guys can reference it, but it won't hold you any longer. So if you got the first activity we did working, just send me the URL. And if you work with the partner on it, I know some of you went off on your lonesome again, which made me sad. But if you work with the partner, send me the URL and tell me who your partner was. You don't both have to send me something. And that should be it. Schedule a booty call with me.
Did you get a
Tomorrow.